Oh, Onyx, yes. Janet moaned to the olive-skinned Greek with rippling muscles that knelt between her spread legs, lapping tenderly at her wet femininity. Oh, Onyx, make me come, baby. Make me scream out in triumphant lust. The grinding motor of the snowplow as it drove slowly down her street brought Janet out of her beautiful dream. A dream about the man in the novel she was reading last night. A man so easy to visualize and fantasize about because he was unequivocally every woman's desire. She covered her ears to the menacing sound, hoping to go back to sleep and pick up where she'd left off, but the closer the machine came, the louder its sound and the more awake she became. One last time, she told herself and held the pillow over her face, pressing snugly at her ears. Well, almost. She tried to reconstruct the last scene, holding it firmly in her mind as she hummed the noise away with a distant, medieval melody. Beneath the pillow a smile was raising her lips at the reconjured face of Onyx Sterling. His trim face and chiseled features, and those deep-set penetrating blue eyes sparkling like lapis. Oh, and that magical tongue that once again was licking her toward ecstasy. More, more, her muffled voice pleaded. Yeah, that's it, baby. Oh, yeah. Oh! Something about this dream wasn't quite right, she noticed when realizing the sound of the snowplow had invaded her slumbering fantasy. No, I'm not in Kansas anymore, she said, then slowly raised the pillow and looked down her body to see Neville lapping away at her crotch, looking as if he was experiencing the finest gourmet dog food that money could buy. His eyes stared up into hers, and for a brief moment she could have sworn they were those of a human being. Eyes and only eyes was all she could see, and the motion of a drooling thick tongue gliding smoothly along her puffy labia. Janet grasped her knees and pulled them up to her chest, spreading her legs wide to feel every sensuous stroke he could give to her, then screamed savagely as her muscles within began to constrict tighter and tighter until she felt she would implode. Stop, she shouted, and her body fell limp. He rested his long snout upon her brown bush and waited for her next command. Neville, she said softly as she started only at the ceiling above. This has got to stop. It's not right. Maybe being only a dog, you don't realize this, but I do. It's bad enough what you're doing, but what's worse is I'm enjoying it. We must nip this in the bud, Neville, before it becomes a habit. Do you understand what I'm saying? MHM, Neville voiced in a low, vibrating tone. I mean, what if someone found out? What would they think? At first, I thought it would be funny, but it wouldn't. It's not as simple as interracial couples, Neville, which people are finally coming to accept. This is sick. This is sexuality between human and canine, bestiality, for crap's sake. Now, let me up so I can take a shower, okay? Neville obeyed until he heard the water spray in the tub, then rolled over to clean his broadening tool that twinged and dripped with excitement. The discarded snow looked like parted mountains up and down the streets. Someone, probably giddy from being cooped up for so long, had erected a stick with a white sheet attached at the top which read the dig out and fluttered in a friendly wave with the soft winds. Janet was finally able to get out of the house and see her neighbors on the block as they cleared their sidewalks. Where's your pony? Rose Hawberk, Janet's next door neighbor, asked, inside being punished. I thought we'd see you out and about with Neville pulling you on a sled. I bet his legs are strong enough to get through this mess. If not, close enough. Maybe next year, huh? Yeah. Set you up a little stand and sell tickets. That's what I'd do. For what? Janet feared to ask as her mind reverted to the shameful romp. For people to ride him, you know, like the kids. They'd get a kick out of that and think he was an actual horse, I bet. Look, there he is now. They're in your window. I believe it. He never lets me out of his sight. Why, he loves his mistress. That's all. I swear every time I see him, he's bigger than the last. What's he weigh now? Close to 200, I bet. Near enough. I'm waiting for his metabolism to slow down. Should pretty soon. He's about a year, right? I guess. So, you've been looking for another job? Not yet. Maybe this spring. It's a shame about your old place of employment. They still don't have a clue as to how the fire started, do they? I guess not, but I'm not worried about it. Maybe it sounds wicked, but they probably deserved what happened to them. After what they did to you, that's true. What a shame. All those years you wasted, dear. That's one reason I don't care for computers. They talk about foreigners taking jobs, but have they ever stopped to estimate how many have lost their place in employment because of some machine? Maybe you should take a course in computing this summer. It would give you something to do, a place to meet people, and get a better job when the time comes. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll just aim for something that can't be replaced by one of those damn machines, but still, I don't want to do that until later on. Good for you. You deserve this vacation time. Get out and enjoy yourself while you're still young, I always say. The tavern popped into her mind again. I just may do that, she said with an impish smirk, aimed at Neville. Maybe even catch yourself a feller, huh? A pretty girl like you shouldn't be sitting home every night alone. Well, I'm not exactly alone, Mrs. Hawberk. True, but Neville's just a dog, honey, and you need someone you can talk to and, have fun with. Janet giggled at her deep secret, then noticed how pitifully lonely Neville looked at the large window. He was sorry for what he'd done, tearing the bath towel from her, then knocking her down to the floor. His jaw throbbed from her clenched fist, and his ribs felt bruised from her powerful kick. There was something about her that made him do those naughty things. It was a reaction he just couldn't control. Even seeing her outside wrapped in layers of clothing made his member swell to an uncomfortable size, extending further and broader each time outside its furry tan sheet. It was even becoming heavier as each day it took on a different, more distinctive shape and color. Actually, his entire body was changing, but not as fast as one particular area. It took nearly another week for the town to dig themselves out of nature's blanket and get back to the norm. Thanks to the couple days of bright sunshine, no outsider would have guessed this town had been under nearly 5 feet of snow by the time it was over. Pickup trucks hauled away the mountains, transporting the snow to some refrigeration plant where it would be put into semis and driven down to Florida for the children to play in. Janet was pleased with the changed behavior in Neville and assumed her last scolding must have made him understand. Or maybe he was finally over his puberty stage. Also, over the course of the week, she had given Rose's suggestion some serious thought and finally took the plunge. Earlier that day, she went into town and picked out a dress that bordered on seduction yet didn't look overly suggestive. The form-fitting red mini fit her body like a glove, accentuating every curve of her new figure. She also treated herself to a perm and cat-like acrylic nails, painted to match her dress. All heads turned when Janet slinked into the tavern. The scent of testosterone hung heavy in the smoky air. Sitting sideways on the stool at the bar, she scanned the dimly lit room slowly, drinking in the attention they were giving back. It was a smorgasbord of men, all right. Every size, shape, height, color, and age she could ever imagine was there tonight. Her only set rule was to weed out the jerks, weirdos, lowlives, and married ones. Tonight, she was going to start anew. She took a couple sips of her soda through the dainty straw, then licked her glossy, deep wine-colored lips slowly. She felt the envy from the few women seated amongst the men, and it elevated her ego slightly. Well, hello there, pretty lady. Haven't I seen you in the movies? A gentle voice asked her from behind. She rolled her eyes as she spun the stool around. I wish I could give you a star for originality on that pickup line, but I'm fresh out. Ah, pretty and sassy. That's just what I like. Hello, I'm Bob Smith. What's your name? Obviously, this guy wasn't a local, and it was probably a pretty safe guess that wasn't his name, so she played the part she'd always dreamed of and answered him with Lola. Lola Amor. A beautiful name to fit the owner. Can I buy you a drink? That depends. Have you ever handled money before? Oh, that was brazen, little lady. Name your poison. He wouldn't have been her favorite pick for the night, but would do for now. She gave the bartender her order, then studied Bob nonchalantly as he talked away. His coal-black hair was neatly cut, and she gave him mental credit for not covering his receding line with a comb-over. His face was rather round with tiny, chubby cheeks, and his eyes were a common brown. He said he was from Houston, Texas. An oil man. She knew that was a bunch of bull too, but didn't let on. After all, he was supporting her drinks tonight. Bob seemed to border on conceit, going on about his fantasy life. But if he didn't wear or show signs of a wedding band, she didn't care. All in all, he wasn't that bad of a guy. Maybe he was nervous and babbled to keep from showing his insecurities. Okay, maybe he was from Texas. He did have that drawl when he spoke, but the oil he bragged on was probably Wesson, and for every case you bought, a free rubber sheet came with it. 90 minutes was about all she could take of his constant running of the mouth, so she invited him back to her house for a nightcap to see what he was like alone. She hoped he wouldn't be so flamboyant, not having the other men around as competition. Bob waltzed her across the room and in the meantime had somehow stripped himself out of his pants. His manhood stood, poking comically between his shirt tails, like a sprout growing from the dirt. He spread her legs and gasped in delight to see she wasn't wearing anything but a garter under that short dress. Condom, condom, he kept muttering while fumbling the wrapper open. Do you want to put it on, or should I? I don't really think that'll fit me, she giggled, then followed it up with, no, you go right ahead. I like to watch. She hadn't any idea of how to work one of those. Besides, she would probably scratch the hell out of him or end up tearing the latex with her new nails. He fondled her only briefly before diving himself inside, then rode her like a rabbit. How is it? He asked. Does it feel good for you, Lola? Fine, she replied with little enthusiasm. Maybe you'd like this too, he panted, then dropped his face down between her breasts where he proceeded to make horrible, bubbling noises that turned her off even faster than his jackrabbit screw. Not wanting to speak any more than possible for fear of laughing aloud and bruising his ego, she simply directed his face toward a breast and maneuvered his lips onto a nipple. Maybe he wasn't a good lay, but boy howdy, he sure knew how to work a tit into a frenzy. If only he weren't so obnoxious with everything else. Ooh, yeah, she moaned, trying to sound authentic and encourage him just get it over with. Bring me home, Bob. Make me scream, Bobby. It wasn't a scream that rattled the window above the sofa, but more like a high-pitched shrill, and it sure didn't come from Janet. What the hell is that? Bob shouted in fear to the beast that bared its sharp white fangs and now growled deep and threatening, right in his face. Oh, that's my boy, Neville. Say hi to Bob, Neville. WOOF, Neville responded, spraying the stranger with spatters of jealous drool. Bob jumped up, and in a mad dash to the door, he grabbed his pants as a second thought. And I thought he screwed fast. Janet laughed as Neville laid his head on her bare chest, sniffing at the scent of the stranger. You're a bad dog. It's probably just as well, though. I don't think he was my type, do you? Hey, what's happened to your nose? Looks like you skinned it where the black's worn away. You feeling okay, Nev? He licked delicately at her nipple and gave a short whine at the flavor of the stranger's saliva. He didn't like that taste one bit. After not being disciplined for his action, he flicked his tongue to the other nipple that hadn't been touched by the stranger, and it tasted sweet. She rewarded him with a scratch to the ear. Woe is me, Neville. What am I going to do with you? Even your tongue was better than Bob's. Oh, well. What say we head to bed, boy? He looked up at his mistress, and there was hope in his big, steel-gray eyes after her last comment, but his thoughts quickly diminished when she stood and let out with a hearty laugh when looking down at her foot where something wet laid. Neville had obviously scared Bob right out of an erection, and from his precious condom. Her head still felt woozy from drinking, and she used Neville to guide her back to the bedroom. Come on up, she said, patting the king-size bed. If you promise to be good, I'll let you stay in here with me, okay? Neville understood and laid his head on the pillow next to hers, then sighed deeply while watching her from the slit of his nearly closed eyes that burned from the bright nightstand lamp. He was beginning to see the room in all its color of blues, pinks, and lavenders. Neville rested his front leg over her blanketed body, holding her in a secure, non-threatening manner. He didn't much care for the scent she carried home with her tonight. It wasn't her usual aroma of perfume or bubble bath, but he could tolerate it for the night. Good night, boy, and sweet dreams. Good night, Janet, Neville whispered in response.